And it is my pleasure to turn over two podiums, one to David and one to Kristen.
Good evening and welcome. It's great to be back at Brown. I want to thank Ginny in particular and the Brown Club of Rhode Island for setting this up. A Rope and a Prayer is the story of the 7.5 months we spent apart as newlyweds while David was a hostage of the Taliban, specifically of the Haqqani fraction. I was in New York trying to figure out where he was and how to free him. It's also the story of the American failure in Afghanistan and Pakistan. In many ways, our experience is a microcosm of the broader dynamics that have plagued the American effort there. I'm not an expert on Afghanistan or Pakistan. Prior to this experience, most of what I knew about the region was based on David's reporting and reading 3 cups of tea, I'll be honest. I did have the opportunity to visit Pakistan once, about 6 months before the kidnapping with David. And I'm so thankful I had that experience. We visited Lahore for a few days. We spent time with students at universities, Pakistani journalists, and it just underscores the fact that militancy is not the norm there, it's the exception. And that's a point we really want to underscore with the book. When he was away in captivity, I had actually just started a job at Cosmopolitan magazine. Quite a difference from his surroundings. In the initial moments after I found out, I had a very steep learning curve. David's colleagues at the Times were tremendous. We did make the decision to keep his case private. We can talk a little bit more about that later in the question and answer section, but I firmly believe that that is one of the reasons why he's here today. There's a few things that I learned about the Taliban, the people holding David specifically. I'll keep it brief. When they demand millions of dollars in ransom, they call you collect. This is something that happened to me several times. I had 2 or 3 communications from the captors at home. Always they would call with a stipulation that I should look at the number on caller ID and then call them back because they didn't have enough credit on their phone cards. So this was added insult to injury, but it actually was kind of a blessing in that it gave me time to collect myself before I had to talk to them and try to negotiate for David's release. They have infinite patience. We thought they would hold David indefinitely. They don't live in caves. They're very disciplined about how they use technology. They Google, they play video games, and they watch videos, American-made videos, and they also make videos. I received several communications by video during the captivity as well. They think all Americans are millionaires or have access to a lot of money. I think they thought I could call up Warren Buffett or Bill Gates and simply ask for a loan. I wouldn't rule that out actually, but I never had to do that, which was the godsend. They want to be viewed as a legitimate government, yet they kidnap civilians. They have safe havens in the tribal areas of Pakistan, specifically Miran Shah, and this is where David was held. They don't distinguish between U.S. political parties, Democrat, Republican. It was really interesting when the captor, the head captor, Siraj Haqqani, found out that Obama was coming into office. He referred to the change promised by the administration as, well, it's a different ear of the same donkey, which didn't give us tremendous hope, but I thought was kind of clever. We saw no difference really between the Bush and Obama administration in dealing with our case. Our case spanned both administrations. We did, however, have a tremendous advocate in the Obama administration, and that was Special Envoy Richard Holbrooke, who was Special Envoy to Afghanistan and Pakistan during David's captivity. He's also a Brown graduate. I don't know if people know that. And he really helped pressure on the Pakistani side. There was a sense that David's captors were assets of the Pakistani intelligence agency, the ISI. And so Holbrooke tried to pressure the ISI to effect David's release, for them to pressure the Haqqanis to release him or to simply have them contact the family. We had several phases of long silence. Holbrooke also arranged for our family to meet with some of Pakistani officials in Washington. Throughout this captivity, I kept a journal. And that really was for sanity's sake. I never imagined it would become a book. I also kept extensive notes. I had meetings with FBI agents, with the New York Times, with private security team, and I knew if and when David came out, he would want to know about the effort back home. So in writing this book, we learned about the other's struggle. Our story is extreme, but it has a happy ending. He's here tonight. And we feel there are elements in what we went through that everybody in this room may experience at some point, whether it's uncertainty, separation from a loved one, the responsibility of caring for a spouse, making life and death decisions for a partner when they're unable to do so for themselves, or simply dealing with a situation over which you have no control. I'm going to turn it over to David. We're going to read brief passages, and I was told that side by each is a... So that's what we're going to do, and then we'll take questions.
Thank you, Kristen. I'm thrilled to be back at Brown. I actually gave a lecture here a year ago, thanks to Tracy Breton, who's here in the front row. She's a professor in the English department, and also an incredible journalist at the Providence Journal. And I'm also proud to announce tonight that I will be teaching a class at Brown next academic year in nonfiction writing, and I'm just delighted to try to help create a new generation of journalists. Our profession and our world needs them. I also want to thank the three veterans that are here, and we will keep this relatively short and want to take questions, and I'm eager to hear their thoughts on Afghanistan and Iraq, and respect them for their service. Many people question why we would have tried to write this book together. I was kidnapped only 2 months into our marriage. We were basically newlyweds, so we spent 7 of our first 9 months together as a married couple. I was in captivity. You'd think that maybe the worst thing you could do after an experience like that was to try to write a book together. We actually found it cathartic. It helped us each understand what the other person went through throughout these 7 months. It was extraordinary to go from being together constantly, and planning our wedding and getting married, to just this period of this sort of black hole. I had no idea what she was doing, for months at a time, and it was wonderful and amazing to learn all the things she did to try to help us. I'm gonna read first a passage from the book. What occurred was I was, and if any of this is repetitive with my earlier talks at Brown, I apologize in advance. I have tried to keep this different. I was working on a book about Afghanistan since 2001. In November 2008, and I had been struck by the popularity of the Taliban. They'd really had a resurgence in the fall of 2008, and I felt for the book to be credible and as thorough as possible, I should interview a Taliban commander. I found a Taliban commander who had given interviews to 2 foreign journalists before and not kidnapped them. I met with one of these journalists. It was a European journalist. She had actually interviewed this commander twice. I met her the night before I went off to my interview. She said, "You are in danger, because you're an American, but I don't believe he will kidnap you." Unfortunately, we were all wrong. The next morning when we departed for the interview, it was November 10th, 2008, myself, an Afghan journalist, Tahir Ludin, and an Afghan driver, Assad Mangal, as we drove to the meeting point, we rounded a corner and found a car blocking the road. 2 men armed with Kalashnikov assault rifles then ran towards our vehicle. They shouted at Tahir and Assad. They ordered Assad, the driver, out of the driver's seat and into the back seat with me, and they ordered Tahir out of the passenger seat and into the back seat with me. This next passage sort of describes the thoughts that went through my head as these 2 Taliban gunmen took over our car and drove us down the road. There was a second car, a station wagon, with more gunmen that appeared, and that was sort of following us as a chase car. The driver punches the accelerator, and we cross into the open desert. The gunman still aims his Kalashnikov at us. No one speaks. I glance at the bleak landscape outside, reddish soil and black boulders as far as the eye can see. I fear we'll be dead within minutes. The longer I look at the gunman in the passenger seat, the more nervous I become. His face shows little emotion. His eyes are dark, flat, and lifeless. I think of my wife and family and am overcome with shame. An interview that seemed crucial hours ago now seems absurd and reckless. I've needlessly risked the lives of Tahir, Assad, and me. We reach a dry riverbed, and the station wagon we are following stops. Our car does the same. They're going to kill us, Tahir whispers. They're going to kill us. Tahir and Assad are ordered out of the car. Gunmen from the station wagon beat them with their rifle butts and lead them away. A gunman from our car motions for me to get out of the vehicle and take a few steps up a sand-covered hillside. While one guard points his Kalashnikov at me, the other takes my glasses, notebook, pen, and camera. I am blindfolded, my hands tied behind my back. My heart races, sweat pours from my skin. Habernigar, I say, using the word for journalist in a local language. Salam, I say, using an Arabic expression for peace. The few words I know in Pashto, which is spoken by most Taliban, escape me. I wait for the sound of gunfire. I know I might die, but remain oddly calm.
And as I mentioned, our surroundings at this time were in real extreme contrast. I'd started a job at Cosmopolitan 2 weeks before as the photography director, and David was wrapping up his reporting for the book, his final reporting trip in the region. This is sort of the early moments after I find out, and this chapter is called Fun, Fearless Female. I'm sitting atop Times Square. From a 38th floor, I can see all the way to the mouth of the Hudson River. I've just assigned a photographer to shoot a portrait to accompany a first-person magazine account titled, "My Bra Saved My Life." We will photograph the once injured hiker who hung her bra out as a beacon to alert passers-by. Nothing attracts attention like a bright red sports bra, apparently. In a pinch, it's a real lifesaver. I smile to myself. This is a far cry from my husband's line of work. The phone rings. It's my brother-in-law, Lee. He tells me that David never returned from his last interview in Kabul, a meeting with a Taliban commander. This is news to me. It's a crisp afternoon. The sky is clear, the river calm. Despite the tidiness of my new modern surroundings, I feel as if my life has plunged into disarray. Here it is, I think. My worst fear come true.